Have you ever heard of a portfolio company that buys small companies that is going to go public for $1 billion? Well, in this episode, we're breaking down the story of Andy Wilkerson and his company called Tiny. We're going to walk through their journey from 2006 to 2023 on how they did it and how they're doing it much, much differently than probably how you think about entrepreneurship. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around. I promise you won't be disappointed. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Bootstrap. And so I've been on this kick lately, man, where I just love going down the rabbit hole, trying to find people who built companies, one that like most people don't know about, right? They're not, I wouldn't say the guy we're talking about today is a household name, but also they've done it by just slogging it out for years, bootstrapping, right? They didn't go raise money and then somehow managed to take the company public or maybe raise a bunch of money and they're still privately held. But today we're talking about a company called Tiny. So today's episode is called Going Small to Get Big. And this company called Tiny was founded by a guy named Andrew Wilkerson. And he had a partner in the deal whose name is Chris Sparling. They co-founded this company called Tiny. And funny enough, when you go to their website, they call themselves an overnight success, 15 years in the making. So that's the first thing I want to say about these guys is to bootstrap a company, it probably takes a little bit longer than you would maybe hope or anticipate, or at least maybe what gets highlighted in the media, right? Because you only hear about the Cinderella stories, 19-year-old
right? 19-year-old who built a $4 billion.
Dropped out of college and started, whatever, Microsoft, right? And so that's actually not reality, but you can do something consistently for 15 years, 20 years, and build an incredible company. But it takes some real vision. And so when you read the website, it's tiny.com if you guys want to go check it out. It says we started our business in 2007 and before we knew it, we had hundreds of employees across a bunch of companies. Yeah. Along the way, a variety of private equity and venture investors approached us, but it was always a miserable experience. We asked ourselves why other buyers dragged out deals for months and renegotiated over and over again. It was horrible. Then we read about Warren Buffett. Does billion-dollar deals quickly by keeping the process painless and promising founders to take good care of their businesses. Nobody had done this for technology companies like ours. So we said, screw it. And we decided to do it ourselves using Buffett's simple approach. In 2014, we stopped starting companies and started buying them using a simple 1-month process, then leaving the companies alone to do their thing. Turned out we were right and founders loved it. They founded 11 companies. They have majority ownership in 35 companies. They have minority ownership in 90 plus companies. They have 900 plus employees globally, and they had 17 on their head office team, which would be the company that kind of oversees all the other companies. And they're going public, or they went public for about a $700 to $1 billion valuation. So the question is, how do you do that? And so today's story is all about how they started and how they got to where they are today. But before we jump into that, D, I think you had some quotes that you wanted to kind of read through related to the business itself so people can kind of frame up what the heck it is that they're doing, what they're buying, maybe get a little more context. Yeah,
so in learning a bit about Andrew's story and Chris's story too, include him, I came across several different interviews, but how he talks about how they think about business. He says, he used there's 4 different statements here. He says, we like businesses with small total addressable markets that are healthily growing at 20 to 30% a year that aren't going to necessarily be $1 billion business. He says, I'd rather buy the auto dealership and dry cleaners of the internet rather than the super flashy, highly innovative companies.
Okay, let's stop right there. So that's literally counterintuitive to every other
VC.
Yeah. All VCs are like, well, what's the TAM? What's the size of the total addressable market? And typically it's like the bigger, the better, right? Because they're all just thinking about, multi-billion-dollar exits. And venture capitalists tend to make a lot of bets across a lot of companies knowing that, 90% of them are probably going to fail. So that's different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does he say what size the total addressable market is? I think I read something he was saying companies that are doing, somewhere between 500,000 to 15 million.
I didn't come across that one.
Yeah. So they're not buying huge companies. I mean, a $500,000 company is not that much.
No, but the one thing they do.
They do?
The one thing they do, they look at it as old way of doing business versus new way of doing business. And so when he says a phrase like the auto dealerships and dry cleaners of the internet, don't miss that part for you guys listening. He's talking about internet-based businesses and this new economy that people are often like, that's not Meta. That's not X. That's not, whatever, you name it. And he's like, ooh, I want to look at that one.
Yeah, they call themselves a long-term holding company for internet businesses.
Mm-hmm.
They specialize in acquiring profitable, simple, and often boring internet businesses. So what do you have a list of some of those businesses that they
don't. There are like 30 right now. So there are like 30. But the winners, they really built their momentum off of essentially two winners being Dribbble and WeCommerce.
Yep.
With Dribbble being like think of, if you're familiar with GitHub, it's like a GitHub for designers. Think community, think opportunity, projects. And then WeCommerce is really a sort of e-commerce minded platform that's getting people into the Shopify ecosystem. And so those were the two winners between the two of those. And then the company that he started in 2006, MetaLab, that I know you're going to touch on. And those three really created the snowball for what has become Tiny.
Yep. Yeah, when you go to their site, you can see that pretty much everything they do is very. It feels very related to each other, even though they have something like stamps, or they have this Aero coffee press thing. They have a watch company mixed in there. They're just very high design, and they leverage the internet to primarily sell. They're not doing any kind of retail or anything like that. So the second thing that they did really well is they were clear about their lane, their niche. They weren't trying to buy everything.
Right.
One of the things we're doing in our fund right now is we're going after blue collar type businesses. Like, it doesn't matter how much money Elon Musk has. When his AC goes out or his heater goes out, he's calling an HVAC guy, right? So we love that industry. Or, hard things like paving, concrete, things that infrastructurally will still be around because they're not really being innovative. We haven't found a better way to do it yet. And like in the Midwest, for example, we're constantly turning over the paving and the asphalt because there's so much snow, and the hot and the cold pressure constantly cracks and destroys the concrete and the asphalt. And so you constantly have to turn it over. Mm-hmm. So it's like a never ending ice cream cone. You lick it down and the ice cream refills itself all over again. You just keep licking it all over again.
Looking at, so where do you want to go with this? Because there's a couple of different ways we can go, but
what are you thinking?
Well, honestly, learning about this guy Andrew Wilkerson, it's funny. I've come across his content.
Yeah, Twitter. He's got a pretty big Twitter following.
Yeah, but I never dove into the story until we were planning for this. And I'm not gonna lie, I really like the guy. Like,
he's pretty humble.
Like, from afar, I'm like, this is my kind of guy.
Yeah.
This is the way that I wanted to play this game. That's honestly what I was thinking. So when I was digging into some of his stuff, I was really paying attention to the way he talks about what he says. And, dude, he makes this statement. He says, I'm looking for wonderful internet businesses from founders who are bootstrapped, who want a simple deal with somebody who will respect their culture, leave their team alone, and let their business keep doing its thing. And then, yeah. And then, but how he really even got there is, so they, MetaLab, right? So MetaLab is growing, and they use the money, the profits from MetaLab, to essentially start 5 different businesses. And he looks up and he's running 5 businesses. He's making money, but he's miserable.
Yeah.
And in a moment of venting to a friend about his current state of being successful but sick, the friend tells him about Warren Buffett and Warren Buffett's strategy and Charlie Munger of really delegating their way up into acquisitions and stuff. And that's when the light bulb went off. But it was that pain of like, there's a better way to go about doing this. Because much like myself, he's a self-described someone who he does 2 things. He'll get bored after 30 days. He's bored with the thing. He's super excited about it, but then he's on to the next.
Yeah.
And then admittedly, I resonate with this. He's like, the long-term execution is not my thing.
Yeah.
I'm idea, I'm momentum, I'm hype, get in, let's get started, do whatever we got to do. and then get out the way. And so I really just resonated with you got to do what you got to do. But I really resonated with the fact that he's like, I'm not this super entrepreneur.
Yeah. So I'll say, if you guys haven't seen the most recent Street Smart, we're actually talking about the attributes of an entrepreneur. And that's him to a T. And I said in that pod specifically, there's a difference between a CEO and an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Like a founder entrepreneur, right? Because big idea, and then they're on to the next thing. So he knew that about himself. And one of the keys to being great at entrepreneurship is know your strengths, know your weakness, backfill the rest, right? But the other thing, two other things. One, they're not raising any outside capital. They're using their own profits or creative deal structuring in order to make the deal happen. And I think people often assume that they always got to have money in order to buy a business. That's not necessarily true. You got to have intelligence and structure the deal in a way that's a win for everybody. But then the third thing that you just said that resonates is they're only buying cultures that align with their culture. They have to also be bootstrapped, right? The founders have to have alignment so that they can have a long-term partnership. I mean, when you do that, you're getting into bed with somebody, you're getting married with somebody, and so.
Yeah, it's funny because, we're in a similar space. And, it struck me too, is like one of the things he stands on is like, we're going to this business. It's very easy in our space to be like, we're the takeover people.
Right.
They don't function like that. Like, that's why I wonder why that's why this name Tiny has some deeper meaning to it, where it's like, we're not coming in trying to be this big dog and step aside and, but showing a healthy respect to the efforts of the entrepreneur. It goes a long way. I mean, we talk about that all the time, just in business and marketing in general, to be interested in their benefit, not necessarily your own, while understanding how you're going to obviously benefit from it.
Yeah. So some of you listening to this today might be interested, but this is a whole different business model that's known as a portfolio company. And this portfolio company owns other companies. And so if you're, let's say, an entrepreneur and you're thinking about making the leap, like one of the ways that you can make that transition that nobody really talks about is you can leverage your skill in exchange for ownership and equity in a company. And that can be your way into entrepreneurship. Like, let's just say you're an incredible marketer and you found somebody who built a great HVAC company and you realize that they don't even have a website or a way to drive leads because most of what they do is relationship based. Well, what if you came in and structured a deal where you owned equity in the business, you put in your time, energy, effort, and skill in order to grow their online presence and generate, let's say, residential leads for them for an HVAC contracting business? You can keep your job while you do that. And you can do that, quote unquote, on the side and build equity. And then once it gets to a certain point, you can then create income for yourself and make that transition into running and operating the business. But leveraging bring these other resources, we bring these other skills, and we're going to increase the multiple. But I would venture to say, and I don't know this because it's not really disclosed, but when they bring those people into the portco, odds are they probably get ownership in the overall portfolio company. And then they're selling the vision of like, hey, we're taking this thing public. And when we take it public for $1 billion, you're going to get equity in all of those businesses. So now everybody has this shared risk to be, successful and continue to drive the company and get the overarching support. Because one of the challenges in the small business space is like when you get to Fortune 500s or 100s, like, you got an executive board, you got advisors around you, you have all this money that you can leverage. You can lean on, this guy for finance and accounting, this guy for M&A, this guy for raising money, this guy for marketing, this team for marketing. You have a sales team. But when you're a small business doing 500,000 in EBITDA, you might not have that. So it's very appealing to say, if I give up some equity, I can get access to all these other resources. And so there's no reason why, everybody listening to this couldn't do that if you have some real skill, right? The other thing I love about it is their hands-off ownership and just delegation. I think that's the key too. They understand that they're in the business of buying these businesses and supporting the founders, not trying to run these companies.
Yeah. But the one thing they do consistently too, though, is they will find a CEO though to step into businesses. That's part of their operation model. They'll bring in CEOs to run these businesses that they're acquiring.
So they give the founder liquidity because that founder probably has the same problem that Andrew has, which is they're like the novelty's worn off. Yeah. They're ready to just go do the next thing.
And it makes sense. Why would you stick around? You just got bought. Like we had John White on the pod, right?
Yep. That was a tough one.
Yeah.
Right?
He bought a company and the former owner was still within the business as an employee and it didn't work. He built the thing.
He built the thing. The employees had like PTSD because he was kind of a jerk. He kept doing his own thing because, I own this, I built this, not recognizing the change in power,
Right.
Who was running things now. So I think that's important too. But
Yeah, so it's fair to say that they keep the owner around to some degree unless they're leaving, but they don't continue running the organization. But with a healthy respect to what they've built, they move on and they bring CEOs in. What was neat to discover is how they look for CEOs.
interesting. Tell me more about that.
So, well, one, initially he was just going around on LinkedIn, just finding people, right? But now they've resorted to recruiting, and they have an actual team that goes out and find people. But what he said was, we don't look for number one CEOs. We look for number twos and number threes. But we hope that they have experience in the there's experience tied to the position they're going to be in. But we don't go for number ones. We go for twos and threes because it's a bigger opportunity for them.
Right.
The upside is there. They're not people who have made tens of millions of dollars in a year. They now have the opportunity to, if they're invested in it. And so,
yeah, the one I heard an interview with him, or maybe it was a Twitter thread I read, but the one thing he said that was most compelling about that strategy was it was most important to hire a CEO that aligned with the values, who he could trust had the same values, because every CEO will bring you into the conversation to maybe ask you questions, but at the end of the day, they're going to make the decision that they want to make. And so if there's not a values alignment, then they're going to make some decisions that might not be best for the culture as a whole.
Yeah.
And so his idea was basically hire good CEOs with alignment, values alignment, and then let them do their thing.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, because think about it. You don't want to be the one they're
No.
looking to. Like, times that by 30 businesses, no way you're going to get anything done. Nothing gets done.
Yeah.
So
I also like the idea of them moving the founder out. Just the dichotomy there between you used to own it, but now I call the shots, and that's just tough.
no, it doesn't work in the long term, like we've alluded to, and then So, one of the things I think that where is it? I have a note here. The way he functions, and part of within building this is that he says he lives repeatedly realizing his limitations. And so when he thinks about CEOs and other business leaders and people involved, I go after people who I can have confidence that will help me achieve the thing that we are setting out to do. And I think that really is the mind of an entrepreneur.
Yep.
That really is the mind of the entrepreneurs who I've come to admire, even like yourself, where I don't have to be the one to get this thing across the finish line.
I might not be the one.
Yeah, I might not be the one. I might not be the one at all.
Yeah.
Admittedly himself, he's like, I don't need to run these businesses. I'm not qualified. That's actually his own admission. That's not my skill.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. So I think, biggest takeaways is it's going to, play the long game. You don't need to raise money. You can leverage cash to buy other businesses. Not every buyout is about money. Sometimes it's about the relationship, the win-win, or the ability for the entrepreneur to be able to move on and not have to continually run the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
They might let you do 100% buyout, so you don't assume that everybody wants money in order to get a win-win out of the deal. And then I think the last biggest point I was going to make, we can cut this out because I just forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I have another point. Well, so here's one important thing that I did see in learning more about him, that for our entrepreneurs out there who are either bootstrapping or building right now, is so in 2016 he learned about this concept called inversion. I'm not super familiar with the term, admittedly, but it came to him by way of Charlie Munger,
Okay.
who, for those of you who don't know, is Warren Buffett's partner. But him and his partner, Chris Sparling, they learned about this concept called inversion. And it ultimately led them to come up with this concept called anti-goals.
Interesting.
And I really like it. And I think we, the entrepreneurs, should be really thinking about this. And so what it was is that they sat down and they said, what do our worst possible days look like as entrepreneurs? Like in the business, in our personal lives, like our key relationships, all of that. What do our worst days look like? And so for, in his case, not seeing my kids, being with my wife, bunch of meetings, yada, 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 yada. Okay, we're going to build a business that doesn't do that. And I love that concept.
Yeah, it's good. I I haven't heard it called inversion, but I call it lifestyle design.
Hmm.
So similar to the same thing. I think sometimes entrepreneurs build businesses that they don't even like.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're stuck traveling all the time, or they're stuck selling all the time.
Yeah.
Or they're stuck working long hours. They're stuck in a role that they don't want to. And so lifestyle design is crucial when you're thinking about building your business, at least for long-term sustainability.
Yeah. And I get why they call it inversion, because there's something I do often when I talk to people younger than myself and they don't know what they want to do. I always ask them, I just now realized that I'm doing this without knowing it, but I would ask them, what don't you want to do? And they usually can tell you. And so I think that's where the concept of inversion comes in. It's like, how do you not want to build this business? Get clear on that. Now you know how you should build this.
Yeah. So that's probably why it's important to have a long-term vision for where you're going. What do you want to do? Where do you want to be in 10 years? What do you want to do in 3 years? What do you got to get done in the next year? Because if not, you can pick your head up and realize I built a business that I hate.
Which would be a terrible feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, literally a terrible. It's hard enough to build a business, let alone one you're going to hate. Whew.
Yeah. And the other thing too, I just thought about is they're maximizing right person, right seat, right? He knows what his seat is. He knows that his founder wants to get out. He knows that a CEO wants to get in and run it. So that's crucial. So I think just the core message to take away is there's not one way to do it.
Yeah.
Right. It's not raise a bunch of money and go public. It's slow, steady, build a business you want, build a portfolio company, which is something that most people don't talk about. Leverage your skill set in a way that adds value to the entrepreneur. You don't always need to spend money in order to buy a business. There's a ton of different ways to get the deal done. So just be creative. And the more clear you are on where you want to go, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, dude. I mean, and play the long game, right? 2006, you said you opened it.
Right. It's 2023 as we're recording this right now.
My boy is almost 20 years in.
Yeah. 2006, they started. 2007, they really got serious about their portfolio company strategy.
And then literally he didn't learn inversion to 10 years after that.
And so that the final takeaway is just the journey never stops.
Never stops.
The game's constantly changing. You're constantly evolving. And with each new level, there's going to be new challenges that you have to overcome. And so you need good mentors and people around you to support you on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love that. All right. Well, until next time, we're going to be bringing more of these bootstrap stories, trying to give you guys the inside track on the way that other people have done it so that you can rethink the way that you're building your business and ultimately do it without having to raise money, build it your way, because at the end of the day, that's what we do, man. Entrepreneurship's like art. So until next time, peace out.